Just to start off, I'm Audrey Lustgarten. I'm the managing partner of WR's global team, meaning that I oversee all of the operations in terms of assisting with immigration filings there. Miki, over to you.
Thanks, Audrey. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I am Miki Matrician. I am a co-managing partner of WR's Boston office. We're getting a fresh coating of snow right now. And I focus on U.S. immigration and employment based for all industries and employers of all sizes. And I'm also involved in the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is 17,000 members strong across the U.S. And I'm a chair of the New England chapter, which is over 900 members. I guess, in this current climate where there's so much uncertainty and anxiety in immigration and fear, and it impacts so many stakeholders. And I think that it, really imposes added pressure on mobility professionals. And this global contingency planning, I think, is helpful so that by feeling like you're proactive, you're kind of taking back a little bit of empowerment. And then your employees can feel a little more taken care of, that the business cares about them and, taking the time and effort to think about alternative planning in case something goes awry. Then should I turn it over to Cindy?
Hi, Cynthia Campbell here, and I am an HR manager for SS&C Technologies, Inc., and we are a financial services and healthcare industry back office operations company, and we are on all continents except Antarctica with our offices and operations. I am overseeing the North Americas region specifically, and I am looking forward to sharing with you some of the planning and anxiousness that we are experiencing alongside any of you who are in this space in North America with the new administration. Eve?
Thank you, everybody, for showing up, for supporting us. And thank you, Andy and WR, for putting this together. My name is Eve. I am the Global Mobility Manager for Scopely, based here in California, which is experiencing a little bit of rain today. My role here at Scopely is to support all of our offices globally in matters related to global mobility. And yes, very timely this discussion is indeed, because there is a lot of tensions, a lot of concerns, and we do definitely benefit from a global contingency plan. I would say by keeping our seat at the table, maintaining global mobility seat and maintaining relevant conversations to ease tensions and better support the business, but also our talent. Back to you, Audrey.
Well, thank you all for being here. WR, and we're going to go through this quickly because I know everyone's on the edge of their seat waiting for the actual what is happening with the new administration and what on earth to do about it. But WR is a global immigration firm whose mission is to provide clients with the best experience possible through strategic legal services, predictive technology solutions, and inclusive collaboration. And the thing that really stands out at the moment is just that strategic aspect. We have to, with all the challenges coming down the line here, just focus on being as strategic as possible when there is just so much for global mobility and HR to deal with at once right now. One of the ways that we really are trying to do what we can in this challenging environment to support global mobility and HR professionals was by creating an immigration benchmarking collective. We did this in advance in 2024. And it's really a group that is for HR professionals, global mobility professionals, that allows them to access benchmarking data based on surveys that WR does. If you join the Benchmarking Collective on LinkedIn, it's free to join. You get early access to the benchmarking data. You're the first to know. You get invitations to virtual and in-person benchmarking roundtables, so you can have an opportunity to discuss with your colleagues what they are doing and how it compares to what you are doing. You get access to previous survey data, and you get to influence future surveys. We always love to hear from folks for ideas for future surveys to make sure we're keeping a pulse on the topics that really matter to you and that you're struggling with day in and day out. Our benchmarking collective, we're really proud of our methodology. I'm not going to bore you by reading all of this, but we are running the surveys ourselves. We try to keep things very short and to the point. We have transparency. We share raw anonymous data to prove that it is actually global mobility professionals, HR professionals directly answering our surveys. Our survey sizes tend to be smaller, but that is because we are not going out to large anonymous pools of people. It is really people such as yourselves that do this work day in and day out, that are answering the surveys, that are providing input into what's going on and allowing you all to support one another. We're really just providing a space for that to happen. Miki, over to you.
Thanks, Audrey. So we conducted 5 surveys in 2024, and here are the QR codes that you can access the reports that capture the data collected from all of those surveys. So, you'll see some interesting insights from there, so please check it out. And then on the next slide, here's the QR code for the upcoming survey. Well, actually, the survey is going on right now and is open until February 28th. And as you can see, the topic is communication and change management, timely with the Trump administration, changing the immigration landscape. And our surveys take generally about 10 minutes, so it's not too heavy of a lift. Please consider completing it, and then you'll get a detailed report with the results. So far, there have been over 50 executive orders, including 13 pertaining just to immigration that President Trump signed on day one. And many of them were directed at securing the southern border, calling on the agencies to ramp up enforcement, suspend the refugee program, cancel the parole program, expand expedited removal. That's a process for the government to deport somebody without a court hearing. I think for mobility professionals, the main focus is enforcement. And just as background, as with Trump 1.0, the USCIS website has already removed its previous customer service mission statement that used to refer to the U.S. as, welcoming immigrants with fairness, integrity, and respect. That has gone away. And in various forums, the government is calling for nationals aliens. So that is sort of what we saw last time around and is not unexpected. So the U.S. part of the presentation is really going to focus on the key components of these policy changes that impact all of you and your mobility programs. And then I know there were very many specific questions related to visa processing and certain case types and impact to that. We'll try to answer as many of those as possible towards the end in the last half hour. To start off with what has changed. One policy that impacts, employment-based immigration is requiring registration of all foreign national individuals. And it calls upon, the executive order calls upon undocumented individuals to register as well, and prioritization of enforcement for those that don't comply. The thing is that there's already a provision in the immigration laws that require foreign nationals to register, but it was really rarely invoked. And the last time the US government set up a registration system was right after 9/11 for security issues. And there's so far no specific information about what this system might look like. But in the meantime, what does that mean for mobility programs? How do foreign nationals register? What documentation do they need as proof of registration? And how do they stay compliant? So those are the key questions that come up for us. And for green card holders, registration is really by the green card. So that is the registration document, their green card. Everybody is supposed to carry their registration documents sort of at all times. For non-immigrant visa holders, what is registration? It really is the I-94 that is the evidence of registration along with a passport. And it's just as a reminder, some I-94s are attached to the 797 approval notice, right? As for passports, some lawyers are speculating that maybe colored copies of passports may be sufficient, but that's not been tested. So best practice is really to carry passports and retain a copy of the passport in case it gets lost or damaged. The other component to registration and compliance is making sure that Forms AR-11 are up to date with the government. So Form AR-11 is the form that non-citizens must use to report any changes of residential address. You can do it online or by paper. So that's important, especially this day and age for, remote workers as well, because that also then hooks onto the home work site. So that's something that's good to remember and to remind your foreign national employees. And then if you have any employees that are in F1, J1, or M status, they would need to report any change of address to their university to have their SEVIS records updated. And then just in general, as I said, the key theme is enforcement. And so, it's worth reminding all stakeholders that ensuring any changes to terms and conditions of employment is brought immediately to your immigration counsel's attention to assess whether an amended filing is necessary. So we can turn to the next topic of the travel ban. Many immigration lawyers anticipated, myself included, a travel ban on day one of the new administration. Instead, what was issued was an executive order that directed the agencies to review and identify countries that would be subject to a ban within 60 days of the executive order. So that would bring us to mid-March. Our speculation is that since under Trump 1.0, it took 3 tries for the administration to issue a ban that actually worked and didn't get struck down by the courts. And so, my guess is Stephen Miller and the team are taking some time to study the situation to ensure they are crafting a travel ban that could more likely stand up in court in case of a lawsuit. Which countries will be included is not yet known, but I would guess that countries that are primarily Muslim populations would be a target for sure, and that several other countries may also be subjected to it. We don't know which countries. They are reviewing countries that are recalcitrant and refusing to accept deportees. So right now, it's really best for people to avoid international travel unless it's an emergency situation, like a very ill family member abroad. We're telling people don't leave the US unless you understand you may not be able to come back for a while. And for those people who do decide to travel, if they need to apply for a new visa stamp, this executive order has a potential impact because it says that essentially there will be extreme vetting that was of the type that was in place under Trump 1.0, right? So what that means is we would anticipate delays at the consulates, including administrative processing, which, as many of you know, it can feel like a bit of a black hole and it's very unpredictable. There's no way to know why somebody was subjected to administrative processing, and there's no way to expedite it. So one tip is for people who have to travel, the best practice is really to log their travel in the HR systems or your immigration provider's platform in the event of an upcoming travel ban. If we know certain people are abroad, and perhaps you can reach them and let them know of the news. And if the ban is for a future date, they can try to return in advance of the effective date. I remember this from the last Trump administration. We had a record of people's, nationalities and travel dates. So when the travel ban was issued, we could quickly provide reports for that purpose. And if someone does have plans to leave, bringing the company stakeholders into the loop to plan for a business continuity, right, in the event the employee is unable to come back as planned. And so, are they traveling to their home country where you have an office? There are various considerations there, like how long does the company policy allow for them to work from abroad? Is that even permitted? Are there tax implications? If you put them on leave, how long? There's so many things I think that come into play. And so those are some of the tips. I guess this one is hot off the press, actually, from Immigration Lawyers Association leadership call. I learned that the consulates are sending out emails from client verification at state.gov to verify the foreign national's current or prospective worksite based on the copy of the filing that they get from USCIS filings. And so if you get a questionnaire by email, this is important. Don't ignore it. And it's also a good idea to, make sure that your email account whitelists any emails coming from .gov so that you do get those emails coming in. I also wanted to let you know in advance so that you don't think that it's a scammer emailing you. This day and age, we're all very vigilant about who is this person emailing? Do I click on anything and all of that? And if you do get an email from that email address, be sure to let your immigration counsel know so they can work with you to respond, right? And then also they can let the immigration bar know so that they can collect the data and escalate to government leadership. Yeah, I just saw the pop-up in the chat. It's client verification at state.gov. Okay, so for the next topic, again, enforcement is absolutely key. And so making sure to take the time now is essential. So the executive order called Securing Our Borders essentially directs additional resources towards that purpose. And I want to talk with you about several areas that will be the focus of enforcement efforts that will impact mobility programs. So, the first one is the Fraud Detection and National Security Unit. You will hear people talking about FDNS. That's the agency within Department of Homeland Security, within USCIS, that essentially sends officers to work sites to verify that the sponsored employee is doing what they're supposed to be doing pursuant to the petition that was approved, right? So are they in the same role? Are they at the same work location? Are they doing the job duties as indicated in the petition? Are they being paid a salary that's pursuant to the prevailing wage? So all of those things they would be looking at. And then if there are material discrepancies, then it could eventually, lead to a notice of intent to revoke the petition. Actually, my partner Kimberly Bestrobodeau and I recently did a segment in our series Rapid Fire Wednesdays on this topic. And so it's posted on LinkedIn and on YouTube if you want to find out more about kind of how to prepare for that. For other audits, Department of Labor audits on H-1B, H-2B, perm, what the key there is that you want to make sure that the required retention files are being maintained properly and that it has all the key components, the required components. I-9 is a big one. That one is the audits are conducted by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE. I-9 is required for all employees, as you all know, whether it's a citizen, green card holder, non-citizen. And the rules are so complex and really counterintuitive, right? And unfortunately, because it is such a pain to maintain an audit, it often falls on the most junior member of HR operations who know nothing about I-9s. And so that really can be an area where companies are exposed to liability. So if you haven't already, and I'm sure many of you have at least started to look at the I-9s with all of the rule changes and everything else. If you haven't already, though, now is a good time to do a self-audit or work with your counsel to have them do the audit as well. So if you get an inspection notice, it's a notice of inspection. Basically, Homeland Security investigations would show up with an auditor and an agent and issues the notice of inspection in person. They used to do some email during COVID. They may still do some, but that's really the kind of the way in which we're seeing this. And so the company representative needs to make sure the correct legal company name is in the notice of inspection. And if not, don't sign it. Ask him to issue a new notice of inspection with the correct name. They will give you a 3-day notice to show up and do the actual audit. Never, ever waive the notice. So as soon as you get the inspection notice, please contact your immigration counsel right away. The next one, it sounds a little scary. ICE raids. We're hearing these happening across the country. So ICE is being given a directive to meet a quota of 1,200 arrests per day, which translates to 75 arrests per ICE field office. And this is at the threat of being fired if the quota is not met. So that's why ICE agents are scrambling. It's important to know that ICE cannot just come into your workplace. If it's a private space, they're not permitted unless there's a warrant. Obviously, if it's a public area like a lobby or waiting areas, ICE can enter just as any member of the public could, right? But if they want to enter a private area, they need a judicial warrant. There's 2 kinds of warrants. A judicial warrant that is issued by a federal or state court and signed by a judge, naming specific people that they're going after. And the warrant would usually have a very specific location, like a building number and a room number, usually. And these are typically only issued for criminal issues. An ICE warrant is issued by the Department of Homeland Security for civil immigration violations and not for crime. That is not enforceable in a court of law and is not required to be followed. So it's okay to ask them to leave. Check with your immigration counsel on specific kind of protocol steps on how to handle that kind of situation. But typically, your front desk person should ask to see the warrant so they can understand, is this a judicial warrant enforceable in a court of law, or is it a nice warrant? And then the final bullet there is the anti-discrimination investigation by the Department of Justice. That's the agency that's known as sort of a bulldog agency. And you might think, is the Trump administration really going to care about discrimination? You would typically think about discrimination in the context of like a non-citizen or member of the minority being discriminated against. But this agency also cares about discrimination against U.S. citizens if an employer treats a foreign national employee more favorably than a U.S. citizen. So anytime you're giving a foreign national employee an accommodation because of their visa status, and you wouldn't really do it for a U.S. citizen, a flag needs to go up in your brain and bring it to your immigration counsel right away. And likely employment law counsel would become involved for that discrimination issue. So what are the action items for mobility teams, right? As I said, audit your I-9 public access files, all of your, compliance files, do a self-audit or, engage your immigration counsel to do that for you. You can start with a spot check and see how it goes, or maybe a segment of your files and see if you need a further comprehensive review. Make sure to purge files that are beyond the retention period so that if the government comes and reviews all of your files, if you are retaining files that are beyond the retention period and there are mistakes in those files, the government can still penalize you for those, even though it's outside of the retention period. So be careful about that. It's important to purge. And then the other thing is audit your files against your employees' records and your HRIS and make sure they're aligned. If not, let your immigration provider know right away. And then it's a good time to kind of review your policy or guideline or SOP, whatever you call it, on how to handle government visits. And for FDNS visits, make sure your managers and your employees know how to be ready because they can be interviewed. I talked for a while now. I want to bring in Cindy and Eve to the fold. Maybe I'll start with Cindy. What are your thoughts or plans on how to handle these compliance steps? If you already have protocols in place, are there any updates that you have made already or the ones that you're thinking about making?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to weigh in. We have multiple locations across the United States. And so we don't traditionally have like a receptionist or a front desk person, but we are planning to get some communication out that anyone who makes contact with the public that appears with a badge or any government official that they get in touch with our legal team internally. And then if it happens to be something that requires HR, immigration program, then we'll be reaching out to you, Miki, to let you know that we may need some help on site. We have seen the instance of inspections decline in 2020 with the pandemic, and they hadn't really resurfaced. So we're all a little rusty. So it's definitely going to be worth taking some time to re-educate staff about how to handle those situations.
Thanks, Cindy. Eve, anything to add?
Yes, thank you. We have our headquarters based in Culver City, so we do have a very prominent office. Earlier this year, we started talking about a collaboration, and it is something that we initiated in 2024 globally. So we are doing immigration-specific training in all of our offices. We saved the US for last for a number of reasons, and because the focus is mainly on audit readiness. So we'll have a webinar that is going to be catered for our specific population, which would be HR front desk, anyone that might be touched by any potential audit. And we're going to record it and make sure that it's available on our intranet so that if we have any new hires throughout the year that needs to be informed of this information, it's an easy training material to tap on. So we're creating that webinar series. We're also going to schedule a town hall. Well, we already have it scheduled for now for February, and that's going to be for managers, HR business partners. Our point of contact at WR US side is going to make themselves available for like a 30-minute Q&A informal session. So we want to make sure that we give a lot of visibility now that some time has passed, right? There was a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen on January 20th. And It was hard to anticipate anything, but now we feel like we're better prepared to have a plan of action that is meaningful and that's going to support the business. So yes, I highly recommend contacting the WR attorneys and partners. They're great in making themselves available and helping us creating these very, very helpful training sessions. So I'm excited for that and making sure that we're properly set up for an interesting 4 years.
Thanks, Sue. So we can turn to the next topic of birthright citizenship. So, what is all of this controversy all about? So, enshrined in our Constitution's 14th Amendment is the fundamental right giving U.S. citizenship to all who are born physically here in the United States, right? And so, the executive order entitled Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship essentially tries to strip that right as of February 19th for children born in the United States if their parents were unlawfully present in the U.S. and not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, or if their parents were temporarily in the U.S. on non-immigrant visas, like what your employees hold, H-1B, L-1, TNF-1, what have you. In all the speculation that was leading up to Inauguration Day, we had been hearing about this potential type of executive order being issued, but we didn't anticipate that non-immigrant visa holders would also be included. But within just 3 days of the order, there were 22 states and a number of civil rights organizations that brought suit, thankfully. And a federal judge in Seattle blocked the enforcement of this order. And another judge, I think just yesterday, has ruled the same, which essentially has the effect of extending this restraining order. So hopefully it becomes a permanent injunction, but obviously we won't know this for sure. And this may go all the way up to the Supreme Court. So, for now, for any U.S.-born children, employees should file or renew their children's passports right away and use expedited processing, whether it is possible to do that. And then from mobility programs, there's so many questions that come up, right? I mean, to protect the rights of the children of non-immigrant visa holders, should parents be filing dependent visa applications for their babies, even though they're born here? How would this even play out, though? I mean, because it also depends on whether they're able to get passports from their parents' home countries. Is dual citizenship permitted by that parent's home country? I mean, just a lot of unanswered questions come up. So, right now, I don't think there are any definitive answers to safeguard the rights of these children born in the United States. But for now, the injunction or the temporary restraining order by the federal judge does, block enforcement or block this executive order from coming into force. So, everybody has been preparing for potential Trump administration for months before inauguration and maybe even some cases before the elections, right? There was a lot of discussions around, as listed here, pushing filings earlier for budget is, with the anticipated increase in RFEs and denials, forecasting budget increases and letting business leadership know. And you've all been dialing in to legal updates to programs like this one to stay on top of the updates. I guess I'm curious to know, Eve, were there any plans that you're feeling like, oh, we're going to pivot now? I do feel like it's a little too early to kind of decide whether those proactive plans you had in place, were those on point or not. Maybe too early right now, but is there any adjustment that you're already making based upon the executive orders that came down the pike?
Right. Good question. So we've had serious conversations in 2024, right, before anything was actually happening, to understand what we should do with our current foreign national population here. We set up plans for potential, right, what if scenarios, as many as we can think of without creating panic. So of course the conversations were between global mobility and management, HR partners, and trying to avoid creating more anxiety for the foreign national. So far, we haven't really implemented anything. It's just a containment plan that we have. But we haven't pivoted from anything that we've prepared for the early years of 2025. So, or our early months, days, weeks of 2025. I don't know, Cindy, if you have have planned anything or changed anything in how you guys are preparing.
Yeah, so we started this year with some info sessions that we are providing for managers and employees that are in non-immigrant status. And we are in a holding pattern too, just waiting for more definitive travel ban, specific countries and things like that to materialize. But we will be prepared to execute that format with a new administration update info session. And when we prepare those, they're about 15 minutes worth of content. So we keep it very high level. These are folks that just need the basics. And then we build in the other half of that 30-minute presentation for strictly for questions and answers so that we can give people that sense of comfort and sense of security that their internal HR immigration team, in partnership with WR Immigration, our external provider, has their back. So we have found that platform to be very useful, and when necessary, we will be ready to share additional information. But we're not wanting to stir any anxiety in advance, so we'll wait to see for some more developments.
Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, it's kind of like threading a needle, right? Giving information so that people don't rely on attorney Google. But also, making sure that you're kind of addressing the anxiety head on. So I think mobility professionals have a tough task there. This slide is really your takeaway sheet. So we already talked about most of these, and I think the sessions that everybody's holding with their employees is really important because especially with the ICE issues, there are some good resources out there, and I can throw those in the chat after my US presentation section. But, it's really the basics can be something like, you don't have to speak with an ICE agent without a lawyer, right? You can say, I don't want to talk. They should probably give their name, but they could say, I don't want to talk. I want to talk to a lawyer. That just basic information in itself can assuage some fears. Knowledge is power. So I'm going to turn it over to Audrey. I know there were pre-submitted questions, as I said, and we can answer the specific ones. But yeah, I mean, despite all the efforts to avoid RFEs and overcome RFEs and denials, it might still be necessary to have contingency plans globally. So please go ahead, Audrey.
Yeah, thanks so much, Miki, and definitely feel fortunate to be in the position of being able to offer some contingency plans if needed. There's just so much going on in the US and so many challenges that folks are dealing with. So this information comes from our benchmarking survey that we did, but in terms of, looking at what are global mobility professionals thinking, what are they seeing in their populations and their companies, are they making global contingency plans based on, the incoming administration? And there were really mixed responses that we got back from folks when we were doing the benchmarking survey. Some program leaders were definitely prepared to send employees abroad and were making specific contingency plans for the locations that would be easiest to send people to, based on a whole bunch of different factors, what business unit the foreign nationals work for, where they have offices overseas, time zone considerations, and of course, immigration considerations, because other countries can also have immigration challenges when you're trying to get folks there. And others were less likely, a little bit more conservative, a little hesitant. They had not made concrete plans for developing a global contingency plan in case it was not possible to keep some of their key foreign nationals in the US. Looking at the alternative destinations that folks who responded to the survey were considering definitely topped the list in terms of the location that was top of mind for global mobility professionals as an alternative or a backup. But as I'll talk about in just a minute, quite sadly, there are some negative political developments in Canada from an immigration perspective, and there have been some changes there that make it not quite as easy as a backup as it was during Trump 1.0. Other sorts of contingency planning that folks who responded were thinking about, particularly contingency planning for H-1Bs with the lottery limitations, or if other specific visa options are restricted. H-1B topped the list in terms of programs that people were concerned about and was kind of pushing them to do this contingency planning. But there are definitely a lot of folks who responded that indicated there was just a preference for domestic employment, and they were going to kind of buckle down and do whatever they could to make things work here to keep their US-based workforce. It was critical from a business perspective for their foreign nationals to continue to be based in the US, so they had less flexibility in terms of, sending them globally. I think we've heard a little bit of a theme. People are cautious, people are waiting to see, and we definitely saw that reflected in the survey responses as well. Some program leaders were just hesitant to send employees abroad without clarity on, what would happen in the future. So that's just a little snapshot from our global benchmarking survey and kind of what people are thinking in terms of global contingency planning. But I'm really interested to hear, Eve, is this something that resonates with you? Is Scopely engaging in global contingency planning? Or are you hearing from anxious foreign nationals who are maybe engaging in their own contingency planning and expressing interest in other jurisdictions? Is that something that's come up for you all yet?
Yes, definitely. All of the above. Definitely discussions internally for global contingency plan. I mean, our overall strategy is definitely to do whatever we can to have the best talent where we need them to be. And our teams do work across multiple time zones, countries. So we are lucky in the sense that we have the opportunity of offering that contingency plan, right? We can take a look at 7 different countries and see how we can bring our talent to that location. So it maintains business continuity. So that's definitely a serious conversation that is happening in the background. We do have a lot of employees, since we opted to not create a company-wide communication of what to expect. It's since pattern, right? But we are talking to the employees individually to understand their specific cases, their needs, their families, how this potential need to move could impact them. So everything has been ongoing, conversations are happening, but it's, really to address the concerns of the employees. And with the leadership is to make sure that they are aware that we have a contingency plan, right? Global mobility is prepared, and we have a timeline based on pick a jurisdiction, where do you want to go? So yes, we are definitely sharing that information. We don't really do assignments per se. So we, mostly we would be dealing with permanent transfers here. And this is part of a blueprint that we created back on post-pandemic days and going through the wars that affected employees in those specific locations, that we have to plan with the understanding that there might not be a return for those foreign nationals or even US-based employees. In terms of the 4th point, the preference for domestic versus international, that's not really, I wouldn't say that that's a reality for us because, like I said, we're a gaming company. So if we have to find the best designer, the best engineer, we will support the business to make sure that we find that right person.
I love that you brought up, the pandemic and the war in Ukraine as well. I mean, as other examples, Eve, of when you've been required to contingency plan, because I think there are a lot of parallels that you can draw and hopefully lessons that you and others can draw from having survived, the pandemic, potentially depending on where people's offices are based, survived, contingency planning with very little notice with the war in Ukraine. And I love the wording too of a menu of options, because I think that's really what you are providing when you're focused, on best talent, and you've got an advantage, as being a gaming company. They don't have to be physically in one place, but it's such an important point to we've been there before and we'll get through this and draw on those lessons.
Right? We're in this constant relearning and redesigning things. So yes, I feel like global mobility professionals can handle it, and they know their employees and they know their programs, so they know how to address it best. But I appreciate this forum so we can share what is working for us, or even hear what other people are doing.
Absolutely. Cindy, can I pick on you here as well? What are your thoughts around this in terms of, contingency planning, international assignments? hearing from foreign nationals that are doing their own contingency planning and want you to accommodate it. Are you encountering any of that?
Yeah, that's very common. The foreign nationals, I appreciate them advocating for themselves because that's, this is their livelihood. So I respect that. And they have, a tremendous weight on them when there's so much uncertainty. But they want those safety nets. They want what if this, what if that hypothetical inquiries are coming in. We don't have any hysteria as of yet, but we're feeling a little pinch, though, because I think you're going to be talking about what's going on in Canada with some highlights. And that's one of our go-tos for us in the US is to bounce folks to Canada because they line up with those time zones, like you mentioned. So that helps us keep that business consistency in place if we can get our folks in a similar time zone versus sending them back to maybe their native jurisdiction, but it could be on the other side of the globe. So anyways, that's a lot of what Eve had to share. I was nodding my head through many of her comments. So I second many of her thoughts.
Great segue there, Cindy. Yes, unfortunately, we are seeing updates in Canadian immigration policy that are not ideally timed in that they're coinciding with all of the challenges in the U.S. under the new administration. Though, to be fair, Canada did start these changes in motion, towards the end of 2024. There has just been, although Canada has typically been a very welcoming jurisdiction for immigrants, very pro-business, pro-immigrant, that has scaled back a little bit. They have faced some of their own political challenges, and in connection with that, they have dialed back on being such an open jurisdiction from an immigration perspective. And we're seeing this in a few different ways. It started with some of the kind of lower wage occupations, but now has trickled down to other categories as well. So what we've seen are the big impact, tighter intercompany transfer rules. And this is really relevant for companies that might have individuals in the US who, don't get selected in the H-1B lottery or running into some other sort of problem. They're an existing employee. In the past, you could transfer them as an intercompany transfer to Canada, to your office in Canada, if you had one. And that was really a pretty nice, accessible category for folks to access. And Canada has dialed that back a bit. The category still exists, but it is significantly more difficult for many folks to qualify. They were not able to touch ICTs that were qualifying under a treaty between Canada and another country. So depending on nationality, you might still be able to access under the old rules. But for folks that were not protected by treaty rules or treaty terms, you would have to have 2 years of experience with the company instead of 1. You would have to be going into the same occupation, the same position, not just something that was similar or lined up from a business perspective. So we're really seeing them crack down and make it much more difficult to get those intercompany transfer work permit applications approved. They're also, we're just starting to see more specifics around this. They had announced a little while ago that they were going to decrease their permanent residence, folks that they invite to apply for permanent residence in Canada, and hadn't provided a lot of specifics. Those are now starting to trickle out. I believe it was for the British Columbia provincial permanent residence program just came out with looking like 50% decrease. So really significant decrease in the number of non-immigrants and immigrants going into Canada. And then we're also seeing a lot of limits on ability to obtain open work permits, which were really nice because, if one spouse goes in on a work permit, their spouse, their partner would get an open work permit. And I know that's something that a lot of our clients would take advantage of. It's great because the company doesn't actually have to sponsor. You don't have to worry so much about the open work permit holders' qualifications, how long they've been with you, that sort of thing. And that's been scaled back as well. And only in certain circumstances will folks qualify for those open work permits. So unfortunately, across the board, some not so great updates north of the border. Although I will say it's not totally off the table. It's still a jurisdiction worth considering, and one that I think there is a lot of interest in right now, just given the challenges that we are seeing in the United States. This is going back to our benchmarking survey where we were asking people about global contingency planning and, were their US and their global programs aligned with one another, or was there a lack of an alignment that led to challenges? And I think that lack of alignment is very timely because lack of alignment often becomes apparent in times of stress. This bubbling up during the pandemic, during different wars that have broken out, and we're seeing it again as people are trying to engage in this global contingency planning. If they don't know, for example, number two, decentralized data systems, if they don't know in one central system who they are employing as a foreign national and where in the world they are, it can be difficult to then contingency plan for, okay, we have this number of people here, we could put them there or wherever it may be. So that's a pain point that I think is very timely and relevant right now. Of course, changing regulations and managing things across time zones are, I feel like, perennial challenges that we all face day in and day out in this field. I'm curious, maybe we'll start with you this time, Cindy. Does this resonate with you at all? Are you experiencing any kind of pain points around lack of alignment when trying to engage in some planning here?
Yeah, it does become somewhat challenging. And with immigration regulations, there's naturally an inability to be 100% consistent across your programming because you've got to layer in your cultural and your business norms that vary by jurisdiction. And then while you're trying to remain relevant with, and being competitive. So where it makes sense, we try to have that consistency across our programs, but we have to be flexible too. So it's it's part of the job.
Absolutely. How about you, Eve? Does this resonate with you? Any of these challenges?
Yes, exactly how Cindy mentioned and how you're describing, Audrey. Of course, there is the balance of maintaining the alignment across all the different jurisdictions that we operate, but also internally maintaining alignment with the different teams, right? So we will have different teams working in different games, for example, or, different departments, let's say different divisions, and they each approach immigration in different ways. And so having that internal alignment to maintain consistent treatment of all foreign nationals, independent of what division they are part of, is also a challenge for global mobility here. So maintaining information, maintaining the blueprints of what new requirements are now in Ireland, any changes in CSAP, but also making sure that the teams follow our guidelines internally so there's equitable treatment. That's definitely a challenge. So definitely a pain point. And time zone, do you guys have time zones? My calendar is perpetually open, independent of what time it is.
You just have a lot of coffee, Eve. That's what you have. I wouldn't believe anyone in this global mobility field who said that time zones were not a challenge for them. It's inescapable, sadly. Well, thank you for sharing that. Just quickly going over this, we've got these challenges and, people are really transparent in their responses to the global contingency planning and alignment survey with sharing like some of the challenges that they had. And then also talking about some of the solutions, which is, I think, what we all want here, solutions to lack of alignment, solutions that will enable us to engage in global contingency planning when we are facing these challenges in the US. And we really saw some themes around like the solutions that people had found to the challenges that they faced, particularly, vendor collaboration and research. A few of the answers there made me laugh. It was basically like, just demand everything from your vendor at all hours of day and night, and they will solve it for you. Potentially good advice. You should definitely not hesitate to lean on your vendor in times of challenge and have them support you with everything that you're going through. Another solution that folks talked about was policy and program centralization and really trying to centralize programs under one team and one vendor so that everyone's kind of talking with one another, sharing data, sharing experiences rather than being siloed. People were also pretty transparent around that not being really easy to do. Like in theory, that sounds amazing, but there are all these challenges that can come up. So definitely not being too hard on yourself as you are maybe trying to do this and it isn't working out perfectly the first time around. I thought that was some really great advice. Technology, integration, and automation, absolutely. Like finding tech solutions to fix your problems is amazing. If we can use AI to do things for us in a fraction of the time, that's always great. And one thing that I love with the time zones, and it's such a small, simple thing, but when a client needs to schedule a call with vendor folks that are in multiple different countries, like what we do is we just have a Calendly link that integrates everyone's calendar. So at the press of a button, you can schedule a call that includes someone that sits in, Madrid, someone that's sitting in Barcelona, someone that's sitting in the East Coast of the US, the West Coast of the US. And there's not all this back and forth via email to try to schedule. Again, such a small, simple thing, but I really think these small things can have a really tangible impact on people's lives when we all have too much to do and are just dealing with a flood of information and changes coming down the pike. Then certainly documentation, templates, standardizing things, not redrafting every time can be very helpful. And of course, last but not least, communication and collaboration. There were several responses around this where just like talk to your colleagues, talk to your vendors. I think we do, because of all the time zones and all the challenges, we tend to do a lot via email, but sometimes there's no substitute for being live on the Zoom or the Teams with the person, for building that ability to collaborate and to really get people to be willing to help you with your global contingency planning. So those are some of the tidbits that people shared in the benchmarking survey. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Eve?
Love Calendly. So thank you for the shout outs there. Absolutely rely on technology to make sure that our jobs are easier. So I agree 100%. Our company has experienced fast growth and through acquisitions, for example. So a lot of bringing the legacy foreign nationals to our providers and ending partnerships with existing providers, because I am a big proponent on having, a centralized vendor and somebody that can be a true partner, and to make it easier for vendor management also. So that is how it works. It works for me. So making sure that it works for other people, or sharing that that's my preference, to be able to work with one single provider. But yes, I agree with all of the above. AI, big fan.
Not surprising at a gaming company. That lines up. Cindy, how about you? I think the two of you are good, like compare and contrast, because you sit in different environments, very different companies and company cultures, I think. Does any of this resonate with you, or anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just, keeping up with regulations, you need to rely heavily on a strong immigration provider, and having that data organized in such a way is helpful too. So, yeah, I just second a lot of what you've said.
Here we're looking at, what solutions people have implemented to improve alignment globally. Again, just a lot of different things that you can do. I love Eve's shout out earlier for being audit ready globally. I think that's a great idea, and to lean on your immigration provider to make sure that you are audit ready globally. Starting in the US, given the current challenges. But again, it's not the only country that is going through change, or where you may find an auditor showing up at your door. So as you are, potentially sending more people to another country than you normally would, making sure that you are audit ready there. So are you audit ready in Canada as well as the US? And just really leaning on local expertise, making sure that you're getting the information that you need to make decisions during difficult times, to make sure that your processes are optimized, to provide, support and training. I think Eve and Cindy, you both talked a lot about having, information to be able to share, whether it's town halls or recordings. And I love that you're both proactive and are kind of, having that ready to go, planning it out, being ready to deploy that as needed, as you're balancing. Should we do it now? Should we wait? We don't want to create panic, but we need to be ready to go with some of this information. So I absolutely love that. And I would really encourage others to follow suit. I think that's great to have in your back pocket if you're a company that's not quite ready to, push that out there. You don't want to increase the blood pressure, so to speak, of the foreign national population, but then having it ready when the time is right, and definitely leaning on external resources. Because another thing that isn't in this, but really sticks with me from other benchmarking surveys we've done, is just how leanly staffed a lot of global mobility departments are. And they're just, are not enough hours in the day for most of you to do your job and keep things running. And then, prepare all of these great, presentations and recordings and templates and all of that. So really leaning on external sources and attending things like this, which are great to, have that information kind of delivered to you and have that support delivered to you, so that then you can in turn support your foreign national population and really support your managers and provide the answers that they are looking for. And I'd say the same, with regard to data management, which is another point here, is like your immigration provider can really do a lot for you. Make sure that you are leveraging the data tools and the technology that they're providing. If you can have them do it for you, if you can have AI do it for you, obviously being mindful of data privacy and all of that, definitely do it. I don't think anyone on this call is going to have a lack of things to do over the next 4 years. Unfortunately, if anything, it's going to get more challenging and you're going to have more to do. So making sure that you are, taking advantage of the resources that are out there and that are available to you. Eve or Cindy, just quickly, is there anything on this list that resonates with you or that you wanted to comment on?
If I can also focus on the employee support, definitely, I definitely rely on my partners, my providers, to make sure that my employees feel like they're getting the attention that they need, answering their questions, right? Whether it is about the L2 extension that is just now coming, even though L1 was filed with premium processing, and what do we do now because it can't get a driver's license for the spouse, but having that one-on-one time, listening to their concerns, I think that is very, very important, and maintaining that consistency across all the jurisdictions, right? So not just adapting how we work with different providers. So that's why, again, I'm going back to centralizing everything to make sure that the service level is the same across everywhere. But yes, having the employees' feedback on how they feel that they're being treated from global mobility in partnership with the providers is very important.
Just one more thing to add on employee care and concern, right? Because this is their livelihood. This is me putting on my HR administrator hat, but tap into what your company offers for employee assistance programs, counseling, mental health benefits, because you want your foreign nationals to be productive, but if they've got a lot of noise because of what's happening with their immigration status, they're going to need some relief and some tools and some resources. So I would strongly encourage any global mobility specialist or HR immigration specialist to encourage their foreign national workers who are experiencing these high levels of stress with the uncertainty to look into what their company provides for mental health or employee assistance benefits.
That's excellent advice, Cindy. I think sometimes we get so siloed and focused on like immigration. How can we solve the problem and how can we get you the visa you need or park you somewhere else if we can't get this one? That it's, yes, there are a lot of other resources that companies provide. And with the level of stress that's going on right now, the employee assistance program is so important to tap into if you've got folks who are being impacted. Right. We've already touched on this, I think, Eve, on your side, but just as we wrap our global section here and then get into all of these 90 pressing questions I think people have, can you just talk briefly about your setup in terms of using a single vendor or law firm versus multiple?
So we had multiple for our North America's region, and then we did consolidate into a single provider, WR being the preferred. So that really gave us line of sight across that jurisdiction and made us be able to be regionalized with minimal effort, maintaining the same number of staff, but taking on at least 25 to 30% more of a foreign national workforce. Now, my EMEA's counterpart and my APAC counterpart have different vendors, but if we would be able to, collectively come together underneath a single global provider, there would be a lot more leverage that we could do. And we could take more time because we are slim staffed. We could take more time to do the bells and whistles for our immigration and mobilizing programs. So it's definitely a future state we're looking at, but there is definitely some benefit to getting into that single vendor space.
Yeah, absolutely. There are benefits, but there are also challenges in getting there, and I don't think that you're alone. Looking at the survey results, actually 46% are using multiple vendors, so it's a very common situation to be in, and there can be a number of different reasons for it. So, well, thank you everyone for your patience as we ran through the global alignment. I know that everyone is probably very anxious to have their questions answered. We received, as we've mentioned, a really large number of questions, which is wonderful. We really appreciate you all taking the time to submit those and letting us know like what is top of mind for you so that we can tailor this to you and we can make sure to get you as many answers as we can. So I think without further ado, I'll turn it back to you, Miki, since that we start off with the US questions here.
Sounds good. I was trying to consolidate some of the questions that came through so I can kind of address them in a bulk. And a lot of the questions seem to be around, what are the expected changes in terms of how the government is going to adjudicate cases? What can we expect? The cases that people are asking about are H-1Bs, L-1s, L-1 blankets, perms. So I can quickly just give you sort of my thoughts on that. So last Trump administration, there was an executive order called Buy American, Hire American. And that order was based on the objective of forcing employers to try to hire US workers first and trying to make it harder deliberately to hire foreign national workers. And so that really impacted adjudications. And that was part of the issue in terms of the increased rate of RFEs that came through the pike. Somebody in the chat and then in the pre-submitted questions mentioned denials of L1 blankets. And somebody mentioned Chennai because that is a high volume location where adjudication decisions can be sort of spotty. And so that is the reality that could be coming and likely coming. Maybe it may not be caused by American, High American, but something along those lines I would expect coming down the pike. In the H-1B final regulations that were implemented last month, there is a provision that codified the deference policy. That was a longstanding policy that basically says if you've previously had an approval for a case and you're extending it and nothing really material has changed, then it should be, the USCIS should defer to the previous approval and issue an approval that would essentially increase efficiency at the agency. So they're not looking at every extension filing anew. Well, so the Biden administration codified it, rushed it through. Hopefully, that is not rolled back. Even if the provision is in the regulations, how the agency adjudicating officers will issue the decisions is up in the air. But that is something to expect that the Buy American, Hire American, we call BAHA, is likely coming down the pike. I guess one thing to note is that, under the last administration, additional requirements that are actually not in the law started to get implemented. So, for example, L1 or TN, those are categories that do not have a prevailing wage, but adjudicating officers started to read prevailing wages into those visa categories. And so, your immigration counsel is going to be on the lookout for that. Is there a way to push back when the decisions are unreasonable and they're basically making up the law as they go along? So that is something we're definitely going to be on the lookout for. For perm cases, people raised, the question of are perm cases going to be impacted? Certainly the processing times are going to be impacted because the Department of Labor is not a fee-based agency and is solely reliant on the government and Congress to provide funding for its resources. And I believe some contractors are already sort of let go that work at the Department of Labor. I don't know about any staffing increases. I would be really pleasantly but very surprised if there were staffing increases at the Department of Labor. I'm not expecting it. Currently, the prevailing wages are taking 6 to 7 months, and the perm applications are taking 14 months. So I don't think it will get any better under this current administration. In terms of adjudications, I think it's hard to predict because, the new Form 9089, the new perm application format went into effect about a year. Is it a year or a year and a half ago now? Time is a little warped in my mind. But it was a new form. And so, people were wondering, how is Department of Labor going to treat some answers to questions that were poorly written? And so it is a little bit of a wild card. They have been issuing, I think our team has been getting all certifications, but there's a question in our mind of, and the Department of Labor has said, we're kind of giving everybody a grace period right now because it is a new forum and the questions were not best drafted. So it remains to be seen. Under the last Trump administration, though, it was fairly stable in terms of perm decisions. We didn't see the kind of tightening or unreasonable decisions that we had seen at the other agencies like USCIS or Department of State. Department of Labor seemed to be fairly consistent. Of course, we did see erroneous decisions sometimes, but it's fairly stable.
Since we're going through everything, and I was wondering if you have seen any changes on NIWs as well.
My understanding from a call with the Bar Association leadership is that NIWs are currently, I think the call was in late January, currently at 40% denial rate at the moment. So the accommodations or the loosening of the standards, adjudication standards that we had seen under the Biden administration is already gone away. And so lots and lots of RFEs and unfortunately lots of denials.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. One of the global questions we got was, how will the new administration impact global immigration? And I think really sometimes joke that countries are like children. If we're behaving badly and steal someone else's toy, they're going to try to steal ours. So there's a lot of the concept of reciprocity in immigration, where if the new administration in the US is taking action against particular countries or individuals, that are here deporting people back, going to be reciprocated by the other country, where it's going to be more difficult for Americans to get visas, to get work permits in those countries that the Trump administration is taking action against. So I would say it may be a bit bumpy on the global side as well.
I just want to address one question that keeps coming up is the processing times at USCIS. And I think that's a really good question. It's going to be a situation where they're going to throw sand in the gears. We're expecting biometrics requirements to come back into play for dependents, interviews for adjustment of status that were waived under the Biden administration. I just want to put a quick plug for, all of you to contact your senators, because, the 540-day auto extension period that were finalized in the regulations in January, the Senate is pursuing action under the Congressional Review Act to repeal that. So now's a really good time for you to call your senators and say, this is important to not only my company, but the workforce and all employers across, the United States.
Yeah, I would just say that we are kind of all in this together, and we have an amazing community in the global mobility space. And so to just, seek help where you need it, rely on each other, keep in touch, and hopefully we can all support each other through this challenging time.
9 years ago, when I joined this industry, I reached out to people and said, I need help. Tell me how you're doing, how you're handling this, how you're managing things. I appreciate this industry, my colleagues, so much that, yes, happy to connect individually if you guys want to chat. But I agree, Audrey. And so thank you for bringing that, right? Like, we are a community, really, and we all definitely help each other. I have received a lot of help from so many people, so I'm happy to share lessons learned.
I have just a real quick word. Just as Audrey said, this is a community within GMJ, and then also our benchmarking collective. Invite your friends, because the more people we have participating, the more that we will be able to further segment the data by program size or industry, and that's going to help you get targeted information. And so please invite your friends and be active in that collective as well. And then for those of you who are in New York City, in April, we're doing a in-person roundtable. WR is doing it. So please DM me on LinkedIn if you want to attend.